Hello and welcome to Creating Disciples with me, Austin Roberts. I'm excited to be here today. We're going to be talking about Nathan the prophet. So let's hear what Nathan has to say about courage and speaking truth to power. The poet Maya Angelou was once asked about the impact her mother had on her and what her mother taught her as a child. And in the Harvard Business Review, Angelou answered by saying this: "I would say she encouraged me to develop courage, and she taught me by being courageous herself. And after years of leaving her and, I think, becoming courageous, I realized that one is not born with courage. One develops it. And you develop it by doing small, courageous things, in the same way that one wouldn't set out to pick up a 100-pound bag of rice. If that was one's aim, the person would be advised to pick up a 5-pound bag, and then a 10-pound, and then a 20-pound, and so forth, until one builds up enough muscle to actually pick up 100 pounds. And that's the same way with courage. You develop courage by doing courageous things, small things, but things that cost you some exertion, mental and, I suppose, spiritual exertion. Courage is not something we're born with. The ability to go and do something or say something courageous is difficult. In fact, I looked up the word courage in the dictionary, and this is what the dictionary says: the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, anger, pain, and so forth without fear or bravery. Courage is tough. Courage is difficult. In fact, I would imagine that some of you are probably struggling with doing something courageous in your own life. Perhaps you're sitting at home on a weekend and you're having a good time, but you are dreading Monday. And you know why. You see, on Monday, you've got to go back to work. But there is an issue at work. In fact, your boss has done some things, he's said some things that are, maybe even bordering on unethical. And you know these things can't go on forever. And at some point, you're going to have to stand up, look your boss in the face, and say, listen, this can't go on. You can't do this. We need to stand on integrity and honesty. But that's going to be a hard thing to do. That's going to take some courage. Or maybe that's not you. Maybe instead, you're sitting at home and you're dreading Monday for a different reason. Maybe you have to go back to school, back to class, and you're working toward your degree and you enjoy it. You're having a good time. You like your classes, but there's this one professor where things seem a little funny. And it took you a while, but finally you managed to put a finger on it. You see, with a friend of yours in the class, after the assignments, tests, quizzes got graded and you got them back, you began to compare answers. And it seemed to you that you and your friend were largely answering and saying the same things, but you were getting remarkably lower grades. Well, your teacher's a tough one. She is going to be hard to go and talk to. But at some point, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to go in there and say, listen, this is wrong. This can't happen. I'm doing well, but for some reason I'm being marked down in a ridiculous manner. That is going to take you some courage. And that is tough. That is not an easy thing to do. But it's what you're going to have to do anyway. Courage is a difficult thing. Courage is something many of us struggle with. It's not natural. It's not something that we just are born with automatically. It's something that we have to work on by doing small, courageous things and ultimately bigger and bigger courageous things. Well, today, we're going to read a little bit about courage. We're going to read of a man in the Bible who himself displayed courage in a time that was not easy. In fact, I'm going to invite you, if you would like to open the Bible with me. We're going to open to 2 Samuel chapter 12. And we're going to read a little bit about Nathan the prophet and a time when he took a stand and a time when he was courageous when it was not an easy thing to do. So we're going to read this text, 2 Samuel chapter 12, starting with verse 1. So let us read together. The text says, "The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, 'There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man, prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, 'As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity.' Then Nathan said to David, 'You are the man.'" You can see him lying there in cold sweat as he has just woken up from a terrible nightmare. The man lies there and thinks about this nightmare. And as he thinks about it, he begins to realize that this is no nightmare at all. In fact, this is real life. And so we sit there across from the man and we say, "Are you okay? What just happened? Was it a nightmare?" And he sits up for a moment and kind of groans. And he says, "Oh man, I have had a rough night. Today, it is not great to be Nate. But there's something I've got to do." "Really? What's that? What was the nightmare about? What do you have to do?" "Well," he says, "did you hear what happened?" "No. What happened?" "Oh man, it is a rough story. But let me tell you. Hear this story." And Nathan says, "Well, King David, interesting guy. And from time to time, David likes to do this thing where he just takes walks on the roof of his palace. He likes to walk around, likes to just look out at the city and the country he is ruling. He enjoys that. Well, one day, he was out walking, doing what he often does, and he happened to glance down into the city. And you know what he saw? No, what did he see? Well, it wasn't pretty. Actually, it was pretty, and that's kind of the problem. You see, he saw this woman down there, and she was bathing. And you know what he did? No. What did he do? Well, he got his guards together, and he said, "That woman, I want you to go find her and bring her to the castle." And so what were they going to do? He's the king. They had to obey. And so they got up, went down into the city, and found this woman. Her name was Bathsheba. And the guards brought her back to King David. Well, you know what happened. King David was wanting to have a good time, and as one man once put it, it was like Bath, bed, and beyond, and lo and behold, she is pregnant. Oh, Nathan, that is not good. Man, that is going to create some problems. And sure enough, says Nathan, yeah, it created some problems, but can you imagine? The story gets even worse from there. No, it doesn't. How is that possible? That's already really bad. He's committed adultery. He's gotten another man's wife pregnant. And Nathan says, well, he knew what he'd done was wrong. And so instead of admitting his sin and his guilt, he went and he tried to cover it up. Really? Well, what did he do? Well, he went and he demanded that Uriah come back to Jerusalem. You see, Uriah was off fighting a war for King David, but he commanded him to come back. And you know, Uriah is one of David's 30 best fighting men. So it's not like Uriah is some random stranger. David and Uriah are well acquainted. They know each other. Well, he sent for Uriah and he brought him back. But you know what? Uriah is a good man. And he wouldn't go home and he wouldn't sleep with his wife like David wanted to have happen to cover up the sin he had committed. In fact, he tried more than once to get him to do it, but Uriah was having none of it. He wouldn't do it. Man, Nathan, that is not good. So what happened next? Well, if you can even imagine, it got even worse. Unbelievably. Really? Well, what did David do next? Well, he knew he had to send Uriah back to the battlefield. So David wrote a decree. He wrote a decree to his general Joab, which basically said, put Uriah out in front by the wall, then pull everybody back, and so he will surely die. And he took this decree, he wrote it, he sealed it, and then he gave it to Uriah to give to the general. He basically gave Uriah his own death warrant to deliver. Oh man, Nathan, that is not good. Yeah, so he went back, he delivered it to Joab, and sure enough, Uriah was killed out on the battlefield. It is a rough situation. Well, we may say that is very difficult, but Nathan, what does this have to do with you? Why are you all involved in this? Well, said Nathan, this is where it gets tough for me. Remember that dream I just had? Yeah, we remember. Well, I dreamt this dream, and God told me I have to be the one to tell David that he has sinned. I have to go to the palace and say, you are the man. You're the one who has sinned. You're the one who has to pay for this. And I don't want to do that. I could get killed. Oh, Nathan, we say, you'll be fine. He won't kill you. Well, did you see what he just did to Uriah? Kings have absolute power around here. If I go and I do that, I might not make it out alive. Really? Man, that's tough. In fact, says Nathan, let me tell you another story just to illustrate how much power kings have around here. Well, all right, let's hear it. Well, says Nathan, you remember back when Saul was king? Yeah, sure we remember. Well, when Saul was king, David was on the run. He was on the run, running away from Saul, and he came to this town with a priest by the name of Ahimelech. And Saul got wind of that. In fact, there was another man by the name of Doeg the Edomite. And Doeg the Edomite saw David with Ahimelech in this town, and he went back and he told Saul. And Saul was angry. In fact, he accused Ahimelech and the other priests of helping David rebel against him. So you know what he did? He ordered his soldiers to kill everybody, all the priests in that town. But the soldiers wouldn't do it. You see, they were scared of Saul, but they were even more scared of God. So that's what happened. And because they wouldn't do it, Saul instead turned to Doeg and he said, okay, Doeg, you go kill them all. And that's what he did. He killed everybody in that whole town. In fact, Ahimelech himself only just barely escaped with his life. Doeg killed everybody, even the animals. So a king has absolute power around here. There is nothing I can do. Oh man, we think, well, hopefully God will be with you. Hopefully he will guide you and take you home. Well, says Nathan, I'm a prophet. It's what I do. I follow the word of the Lord. I do what he tells me to do. I say what he tells me to say. I deliver the messages he wants me to deliver. And so I have to do it. That's the person I am. I'm the prophet. Well, we say, good luck, Nathan. We sure don't envy being in your shoes. That is going to take some courage to stand up there in front of David, look him in the face, and say, you are the man. That is truly courageous. And courage is a difficult thing. It is not natural. It's not something we just have innately within us. It's something that we have to foster. It's something we have to practice. We must be courageous with the small things in order to become courageous with the large things. In fact, let me tell you a story about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the World War II German theologian. Bonhoeffer had become discouraged with the German response to Adolf Hitler. And at that point in history, it had become pretty obvious that war was on the horizon. People were beginning to see Hitler for who he really was. They were disgusted with his treatment of the Jews. And so Bonhoeffer, because he was angry, left, and he went to pastor a German-speaking church in England. Well, his fellow theologian, a Swiss theologian by the name of Karl Barth, was not happy. And Barth wrote to Bonhoeffer, and he said this, What is all of this about going away and the quietness of pastoral work and so forth at a moment when you are wanted in Germany? You who know as well as I do that the opposition in Berlin and the opposition of the church in Germany as a whole stands inwardly on such weak feet. Why aren't you always there where so much could depend on there being a couple of game people on the watch at every occasion, great or small, and trying to save what there is to be saved? I think that I can see from your letter that you, like all of us, yes, all of us, are suffering under the quite common difficulty of taking certain steps in this present chaos. But should it not dawn on you that there is no reason for withdrawing from this chaos? That we are rather required in and with our uncertainty, even if we should stumble or go wrong 10 times or 100 times, to do our bit? One simply cannot become weary now. Still less can one go to England. What in the world would you want to do there? You must now leave, go of all these intellectual flourishes and special considerations, however interesting they may be, and think of only one thing, that you are a German, and that the house of your church is on fire, that you know enough to be able to help, and that you must return to your post by the next ship. Bonhoeffer would ultimately return to Germany, and perhaps in response to Barth's letter, he would one day say, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." Once again, Bonhoeffer would return to Germany, and he would become famous for becoming a vocal opponent of Hitler, of the war, and of his treatment of the Jews. Because of this courageous stand Bonhoeffer would take, he was ultimately arrested. And on April 9, 1945, Bonhoeffer was hung, only 2 weeks before the United States Army would liberate the camp where he was held. Bonhoeffer stood up, and he looked at Hitler and he said, "You are the man." And he ultimately paid for it with his life. Courage is not easy. Being courageous, taking a stand, it's not inborn, innate within us. It's something we have to work on. It's something we have to foster. It's something we have to practice. Courage is a tough thing. In a moment or two, you're going to see a photo flash up on the screen, and you'll notice that in this photo, there is a man. And this man is in a circle, and you can see him there. And he is the only man simply standing there while the rest of these people are giving a salute. This man's name is August Landmesser. And this photo was lost to history until many years later it was discovered by his daughter in a German newspaper. You see, at that time, there was a new ship being commissioned for Nazi Germany, and there were people there celebrating that and saluting that. And Landmesser would not do it. He would not give the Nazi salute. He would stand there stoically looking on. Landmesser got in trouble for this. He got in trouble more than once. But I can imagine the type of pride that his daughter would have looking at that photo, knowing that her father stood there in the face of danger and was courageous and said, "You are the man. This is not right." Courage is a difficult thing. It's not easy. It's not something that comes automatically. It's not something that is born within us. It's something we must practice. It is perilous. It is difficult. It is unnatural. Bonhoeffer was courageous. Landmesser was courageous. The prophet Nathan was courageous. In fact, as we read on in this text, after Nathan says, "You are the man," this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. "I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. That's a rough statement. Nathan really lays it on the table and tells David exactly what God told him to tell David. And he risked his life for it. It's not an easy thing to stand in front of a king who has sinned or done something wrong, point to him and say, you are the man. Your conscience is about to catch up. And God is coming after you. But the question is, after Nathan stood up with that courage, what happens next? Well, the text says, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. It's almost as if Nathan lays it on even thicker in a place where it is difficult to do that. David's the king. David has the power. He's ordered Uriah to be killed. He could order Nathan to be killed just the same. But Nathan stands courageous anyway. He stands there and he says, you are the man. So in the coming weeks and in the coming months, perhaps you will face a situation that calls for courage, calls for that unnatural, perilous, dangerous courage that you do not want to display. Maybe you will go to work. Maybe you will confront your boss. Maybe you will tell him, listen, you can't be doing these things. This is unethical. This is not right. And it could cost you. Or perhaps you will stand in front of that teacher and say, listen, you can't be giving me these grades. It's unfair. I've compared my answers with my fellow students, and you're giving me things that aren't fair to my score. I've done the work. I've done it right. And I've done it well. And that could cost you. It could cost you a lot. In fact, for Bonhoeffer, standing up and saying, you are the man, cost him his life. For most of us, the price will not be that high. The price will be much lower for courage. But the price still exists. And the way we build up that courage, the way we get to that place, is by practicing courage in the small things. Practicing courage in areas where it is easier. Maybe you're just out. You're out on a walk with your dog, and someone else comes up with their dog, and their dog starts barking and biting at you. Maybe you just have to stand there and say, listen, you've got to control your dog. You can't be doing this. And there's a small bit of courage. Maybe you're out. Maybe you've gone out to eat somewhere, and you paid for the food, and the cashier shortchanges you. It's not very hard, but it takes a small amount of courage to look at the cashier and say, oh man, I think you didn't give me enough change back. It's a small bit of courage. It's not a lot, but it's practice. Maybe you're out with your family. You're having a wonderful time, and a parent or a sibling says something unkind. Maybe you just have to turn to them and say, well, I don't think that was very nice. I would rather not be referred to in that way, or I don't appreciate it when you're mean like that. It's a small amount of courage. It's not something huge, something life-changing, but it's practice. And the truth is, if we continue to practice these small, courageous things, when something big comes along, when it's time to speak out against a public figure or someone who you respect or someone who you like a lot, who's done something wrong, the courage will be there. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean you're just going to have a good time. That doesn't even mean it will come without consequences. Because sometimes it will. Sometimes it will be very difficult. Sometimes it could cost you a great deal. For most of us, it won't cost us a life, but for a precious few, one or two, it may even cost that. But that is the price of being courageous in Jesus Christ. That is the price of standing up and looking at the king or the boss or the teacher and saying, you are the man or you are the woman. But as you move throughout your lives and you do things here and there, you take these small courageous acts, it's not like you're going to be picking up 100-pound bags of rice immediately. You've got to start with the 5-pound bags and the 10-pound bags and the 20-pound bags and work those muscles out until you're strong enough to be courageous in moments where it's not easy. That's what Nathan did. No doubt throughout his life, when he was a child, as he grew into an adult, no doubt God called him to do courageous things, to take courageous acts little by little, so that when it came to King David in a spot that was very tough, very difficult, he could finally stand, he could look at King David, he could spell out the sin that King David had done, and he could say, you are the man. You have sinned against God, you have sinned against Uriah, and you have sinned against the people. Your conscience is about to catch up. God is going to give you some consequences. And God protected Nathan. Nathan did not die. Nathan continued, in fact, to be pivotal in King David's life and his family's life on forward. In fact, we do see him later in Scripture in other narratives and other stories. But at that time, he didn't know that. He didn't know if he would survive when he had to stand up, look David in the eye, and say, you are the man. Courage is an unnatural thing. It's perilous. It's difficult. It's hard. It's something we're not born with. It's something we just don't have innately like that. It's something we must practice. It's something we must work out like a physical muscle. So today, as you go into your respective lives, respective jobs, schools, and so forth, I would encourage you to be courageous, to take a stand when God is telling you to look and say, you are the man. Thank you for joining us today on Creating Disciples. We'll see you next time.